I would like to welcome this fourth panel, Empowering Women Through Inclusion in Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Peace-Building Processes. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Commissioner Nadine Maenza, who I call Nadine, our friend to the Yazidi people. Nadine is an advocate for working families and a champion for international religious freedom. She is commissioner at the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Nadine, I will leave it to you to welcome your distinguished guests today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lynn, and to Yazda and to the Zavigan Partnership for organizing this important conference and for inviting me once again to participate. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this solemn day as we remember and we also look to ways to move things forward to strengthen this important community. I have the honor of representing the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF. We are an independent, bipartisan U.S. government body. What we are is a watchdog for religious freedom around the world. And we at USCIRF feel strongly about this issue. We have not forgotten the thousands of Yazidis whose lives ISIS terrorists cruelly destroyed simply because of who they were and what they believed. We've not forgotten about the 2,800 abducted women and children whose whereabouts remain unknown. And we have not forgotten about those of you who have survived, who have persevered through unspeakable horrors, and who have been rescued and have lived to tell your story. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do a few things. First, I'm going to share some of USCIRF's findings and our recommendations, and then to moderate this panel of esteemed experts who can shed light on how best to empower women through inclusion in post-conflict reconstruction and the peace-building process. Joining us in a few minutes will be human rights activist and member of the Yazidi Survivor Network, Zina Khaled Suleiman, artist and human rights activist, Dashni Murad, Katrine Coppins from the Dr. Dennis Mukwege Foundation, Her Excellency Bayan Abdul Rahman from the KRG, and Iraqi Member of Parliament, Razender Mustafa. USCIRF has repeatedly warned about violations against Yazidis as early as 2003. We were among the first government bodies to call for the recognition of ISIS atrocities as genocide. In the subsequent 5 years, we've made every effort to keep the eye of the US government, and by extension, those of the American people, fixed on the Yazidi community and the long-term displacement and collective devastation that the Yazidis have experienced. I'm sure that many of you here share in our relief to see a recent uptick in returns of Yazidi families back to Sinjar, even as some 200,000 members of the community still remain displaced inside Iraq. However, we are simultaneously troubled by reports that those families are returning not because of significant improvements in Sinjar, but rather despite a lack of such development. It is disappointing that after all the attention, the speeches, the genocide designations, and the money spent, that so little has been accomplished. I was honored to speak at this event in Baghdad just a year ago, and yet so little has changed on the ground since that time. The US government and the international community must prioritize support for Yazidis in Iraq and in neighboring Syria to help them rebuild their homes, schools, infrastructure, and lives. The US also needs to take bolder action to address the existential security threats that Yazidis and other religious minorities continue to face today, from the Iranian-backed Hashashabi or Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, as well as from Turkey and its allies in Syria. In Iraq, the US and the international community cannot just look away at the government's inaction. The Prime Minister has the opportunity for a fresh start, and the US and the international community should encourage him to substantially engage with the Yazidi community. If he was to include a Yazidi in his cabinet or as a senior advisor, it would go far towards showing his commitment to inclusion in Iraq. And just as the religious diversity of Iraq must be reflected in the rebuilding process to accurately represent its citizens, gender parity is also paramount to creating a lasting peace. Given that women make up half of the population, a larger amount of women must be meaningfully included in negotiations. Multiple studies show that women's inclusion in peace talks is directly correlated to success. Not only is it the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. The voices of Yazidi women are especially important to build a prosperous, safe community, perhaps more than any other audience. Those of you here today understand the profound horrors that so many Yazidi women and girls face under ISIS. Their voices must be amplified to advocate for their future. As we look back at this trauma on a massive scale, it is clear that emotional and psychological support is needed, as well as practical support for food, shelter, and clothing. We acknowledge Yazda as one of the strongest NGOs on the ground providing this crucial support. But let's also look ahead to rebuilding Sinjar, building real governance, stability, security, and peace. How can we ensure that women are included in this development in all levels of decision-making, especially those who've overcome so much to survive and now deserve the opportunity to thrive? We are now going to turn to our distinguished panelists and bring in their perspective to how women can be better empowered through inclusion in post-conflict reconstruction and peace-building processes. We will have each panelist make a presentation of about 5 minutes, and then we will engage in a discussion with the panelists. And Dashni Murad is an Iraqi Kurdish Dutch singer, songwriter, presenter, TV journalist, and activist for human rights and the environment. She has returned to Kurdistan and established her charity called Green Kids.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Zilgian Partnership and Yazda for the 6th Annual Commemoration of the Yazidi Genocide. On this very dark day, we remember, honor, respect all of the victims of the Yazidi Genocide. We need the victims of this terrible war, the Yazidi Genocide, to know that the world has not forgotten about them. And through my activism, I have focused on sharing stories to empower women and girls and to empower myself under hashtag Female Voices of the World. And the last 4 years, I've experienced the power of storytelling. We learn from each other when we share our stories. As women, we take back our voices and power when we tell our own stories. This is so empowering, and I would say the international media and the institutions to amplify more Yazidi voices and to tell the story in their own words. Now, coming to the subject, I believe that we can empower women in post-conflict reconstruction and peace-building process when we also think of musicals. There is so much disagreement in this world we live in, but we all can agree on a beautiful piece of art. Or when we tell our stories in creative ways, like my previous activity and exhibition supported by the Foundation and the Canadian government, we remembered women who were killed in 2019 by femicide. And it was a dark room with all of their names written, and you had to light up a candle to enter, and you would hear their stories through audio. Every person that came out understood better and was committed to help better. So to me, peace means understanding each other better. And we can use these creative ways to help understand each other's worlds, needs, and struggle for justice, freedom, and the protection of identity much better. And once we understand each other better, we can help one another to achieve justice, because without justice, there's no peace. Now, since the Yazidi genocide and the Muslim invasion, I've seen how the social role of men and women changed during war. I've seen women becoming first responders and determined to building peace, especially within the Yazidi community. So we need to continue acknowledging their efforts and support their important role that we women have during conflict and now post-conflict, like you are doing during this conference. But especially the Yazidi survivors, they have become leaders and activists, an important voice who works so hard for justice and peace building. We also need to continue creating a better and safer space where we can all communicate like this now and listen and learn. We also need, this is sadly, I feel that it's missing, we need better partnership from civil society, because change happens through collective action. Now, through my work as an activist, I had the honor to work with Yazidi survivors in Duhok and in Europe. I could see the tremendous impact they had on their environment, but what I see is that not enough activists are supported, and especially not for a long term. It's important that we create hundreds of Nadia Murads within the Yazidi community. And if the international community wants to continue transform our societies and bring peace to the region, they must commit financially and strategically to continue a large group of female activists, because they are the one who will and become a part of the negotiation table of peace and rebuilding. We need more women to be a part of this national dialogue. And it's these young leaders, voices, activists within the Yazidi community who are teaching us that that's the way forward. I met female activists from Libya, Syria, Colombia at a UN Women workshop in Lebanon. And they showed us data that there's so much success that can be achieved during peace process when peace builders, female peace builders, are part of it. Now, if we want to continue empower women, it's so important that we provide them with all of the tools they need for a long term, not just a handful group of Yazidi activists or activists in this region, but a large group. This is the way forward to empower them, but also to achieve justice and peace. And what's also important is we must continue looking for better and new constitution that tackles many questions, challenges we women face in this region, so that we can finally do our job better and be a part of the national dialogue. Another point I like to raise is reconciliation and finding common ground. That is so important in this divided region. I know there are NGOs and the international community working on it, but I haven't seen a big success or efforts in these reconciliation and finding common ground. What I believe that can help is, while we empower women, let's bring women together in Iraq and the Kurdistan region to find common ground and to work on reconciliation. This helps us to also be empowered. Why? Because I feel like people around the world share a collective biography, but so do women all over the globe. We share a common heritage of suppression, patriarchy, emancipation, and quest for gender equality. And this knows no boundaries and no ethnicities. So we need to do better to gather these female activists and peace builders. And together, while we empower each other, we can find common ground at this divided region.
Thank you, Ms. Murad. That was beautiful. We really do appreciate it. And now we will transition. We have Ms. Solomon with us. So now we look forward to hearing from you.
أريد أنتهز هذه الفرصة لأشكر المنظمين لهذا الحدث المهم. شكرا لكم لدعوتي والسماح لي المشاركة بالندوة النقاشية حول تقوية المرأة. اليوم أنا شاهدة عيان على شجاعة وقوة المرأة الأيزيدية، وذلك ليس لقوة بنيتنا البدنية، ولكن لعزمنا على الاستمرار بالقتال حتى آخر نفس وآخر رمق. التاريخ قد خذلنا مرارا، وخاصة نحن أقلية دينية نعيش في مناطق الصراع التي فيها تتعرض المرأة إلى أقصى أنواع العنف الجنسي، الاغتصاب الجماعي، الاختطاف، والتجارة بالبشر. عندما هاجم داعش الإرهابي مجتمعي المسالم في عام 2014 تعرضت المرأة للاعتداء بشكل أكبر واستخدمت كغنائم حرب. بينما بدأت الشهود وإثارة الإبادة تظهر للعالم، وخاصة من قبل داعش الإرهابي لتمجيد جرائمه، بدأت كوابيس ومعاناة آلاف النساء الأيزيديات. إذا خلال الساعات الأولى الكثير منهن تم فصلهن عن عوائلهن وتم بيعهن في أكبر سوق للنحاس في القرن 21. النساء والأطفال حتى عمر 9 تم اغتصابهن مرارا، حتى أصبحت أسعار الواحدة منهم بقيمة علبة السجائر. في هذه الوقت الصعب من تاريخنا، المئات من النساء الأيزيديات أصبحن مدافعين وأصوات قوية لمجتمعهم. المئات منهم استطاعوا الهرب من سجون داعش الإرهابي وقرروا أن لا يفقدوا الأمل. العالم أدرك مأساتنا من خلال شجاعتنا وعزمنا على القتال من أجل حياتنا وشعبنا، وحتى لا تتكرر هذه الجرائم والمأساة في زمن ومكان آخر من العالم. البعض منا تم القبض عليهم مرات عديدة عندما كنا نحاول الهرب. تعرضنا إلى الضرب والاغتصاب وتحملنا أقصى أنواع الألم لشهور، حتى أصبنا بالإرهاق والشلل ولا نستطيع الحركة. لكن في كل مرة قررنا أن ننهض من جديد لنجد طريقا للهرب وفسحة أمل. البعض حالف الحظ واستطاعوا الهرب، وستحتاج إلى عناية طويلة المدى. للتعافي من الصدمة الجماعية التي لحقت بنا من أجل الحصول على مستقبل أفضل. تحتاج المرأة أن تكون مجهزة بمهارات وأدوات لتكون مستقرة نفسياً ومتكيفة ذاتياً. التعليم مفتاح لكسر الكثير من الحواجز والعوائق. المرأة اليزيدية تحتاج إلى إعادة تأهيل طويل المدى الذي يجب أن يشمل عناية نفسية مكثفة من قبل الخبراء والخدمات في جو ملائم يسمح لها بالتشافي والتعافي وتمكنها من النجاح. يجب أن يتم تقوية ودعم المرأة لكي تتمكن من أن تمارس حقوقها بحرية. المرأة جزء مكمل للحياة إذا أنها نصف الذي ينجب ويعلم النصف الآخر. يجب النظر إليها ولدورها دور بأنه ليس أقل من دور الرجل وتوفير الفرصة للحصول على المصادر والسلطة داخل المجتمع. تقوية المرأة يعني المشاركة الكاملة في صنع القرار والسياسات والسلطات التي تتعلق بالحياة وإعطائها الحق باتخاذ قرارات تتعلق بالمرأة. في المجتمعات المدنية المرأة تحتل مواقع مهمة في الحكومات ومؤسسات الدولة والمنظمات المجتمع المدني والشركات وتلعب دورا حيوي للمستقبل أفضل وعالم أكثر عدلا وخاليا من العنف ضد المرأة. عندما نقوم بتقوية المرأة نقوم بخلق أشخاص منتجين في المجتمعات ومستقبل مشرق لإخوتنا وأمهاتنا وبناتنا حول العالم. عندما أعطي للناجيات الدعم الصحيح والمستمر برهن مرارا على أنهم مدافعين عن حقوقهم واحتياجاتهم. مثال على ذلك برنامج شبكة الناجيات الأيزيديات الذي يركز على الناجيات وسبيل تأهيلهم وتقويتهم. ساعد الكثير من الناجيات باستخدام صوتهن كأقوى أداة للوقوف بوجه الظلم. من خلال هذا البرنامج تم منحنا فرصة للمشاركة في الحوار مع الناجيات الأخريات حيث يتم فهمنا أكثر ونشعر بقوة وعزم أكثر. هذا البرنامج قد منحنا القوة للتعامل مع الصدمات النفسية الفردية وجعلنا نثق بأنفسنا. كما ذكر هذه البرنامج يهدف إلى تقوية الناجيات من إبادة داعش الإرهابي، مساعدتهم للتعبير عن تجاربهم واحتياجاتهم، الكفاح من أجل العدالة ومتابعة المسائل القانونية وتطبيق مبادئ حقوق الإنسان. مثل هذه البرامج الفعالة تخلق نساء أقوى وأكثر عزماً ومن أفضل الطرق لنا لمحاربة الظلم ومنعه من حدوث في المستقبل.
Thank you so much, Ms. Suleiman, for that powerful presentation and for giving us just a picture of the walk that you have had and how we can be more helpful to you. We are now pleased to have Katrine Coppins join us. She is the Program and Operations Director at the Denis Mukwege Foundation. She has worked in humanitarian affairs in Sierra Leone, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Iraq, Colombia, and Haiti. Quite an experience. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nadine. Good afternoon to you all, and especially the Yazidi survivors. I'm very honored to participate in this 6th Annual Commemoration of the Yazidi Genocide. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share the experience of Global Survivor Network, SEMA, and how it has contributed to the empowerment of survivors. As many of you only know too well, sexual violence in conflict is uniquely destructive. It's a horrifying and effective tactic to terrorize, destabilize, and destroy entire populations. Beyond injury and disease, the psychological and social impacts of humiliation and shame are corrosive for victims and their communities alike. When survivors are silenced, shamed, and excluded, impunity becomes entrenched, and the cycle of violence is hard to break. Therefore, we believe that for change to happen, it's crucial that the silence around sexual violence as a weapon in war is broken. The SEMA story began in June 2017, when 22 survivors from 14 countries came together. With tremendous courage, survivors come together to speak out, tell their truth, and seek solutions for themselves and their community. SEMA, which means speaking out in Swahili, gathers victims and survivors of wartime sexual violence from all around the world, acting in solidarity, mobilizing collectively to speak out, and advocating for change. The global network is rooted in survivor-led activist networks at both national and local level and represents thousands of survivors. The international dimension is essential, bringing survivors from different generations, continents, and cultures together to learn from each other. Their journey so far has been incredible. From joint statements and inspiring speeches at national and international events, the survivors speak out powerfully and act together. Survivors consistently emphasize the tremendous value they experience from having direct contact with each other. As one survivor recently told me, I was inspired by the other survivors and they encouraged me to establish my own national network. And another one said it was so powerful to listen to survivors from different parts of the world. They took away my fears and empowered me by listening. The pain and the tears were shared. It gave me courage. Survivors' voices, as we've heard in the past 2 days, bring a human understanding of the consequences of wartime rape and can explain the true needs of victims and survivors. They propose concrete ideas for change. Nothing about us without us is therefore critical to ensure a survivor presence, not only at the international level, but especially at the national level, where policies, programs, and legislations are designed to support them. The SEMA network was able to play a very active and key role next to Dr. Dennis Mukwege and Nadia Murad in the establishment of the Global Survivor Fund in October 2019. This fund aims to ensure survivors of conflict-related sexual violence have access to reparations and other forms of redress. The core principle of the fund is its survivor-centered character. Placing voices of survivors at the center ensures programs are initiated locally and outcomes benefit the individuals and communities they are designed to serve. We have learned so much from working alongside survivors to build their movement. The following lessons I want to share with you today. Inspiration, hope, and solidarity are essential building blocks to maintain motivation and momentum. Connecting grassroots survivor networks in regional clusters and international network enables the success of the one to be the success of all. Time and again, survivors have shown us that face-to-face gatherings have the power to deepen connections and accelerate learning. Of course, this poses a great challenge in today's COVID world. Sustaining through connections and strong connections between the local, national, and international levels are essential to forge a shared vision and amplify survivor voices. Online connections, media opportunities, and translation support are the bread and butter basics needed to gain visibility and reach. Survivors are the best advocates for their own needs and rights. They need safe space, non-judgmental support, sufficient time for personal healing to be able to share their experience and find their voice. Survivors need to be seen as experts in their own right. We therefore need to invest in the survivors' capacities and autonomy with a mixture of mentoring, coaching, learning exchanges, skills development approaches. Survivors will need sustained psychological support, good self-care, and financial support for their time and lost income as preconditions to undertake advocacy so they can set the course of their own movement for the years to come. The Mukwege Foundation and its SEMA members are very motivated to share experiences and offer peer-to-peer support to the Yazidi Survivor Network to further empower them to be meaningfully included in the reconstruction and peace-building process of their countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that important word. We appreciate it. We have Her Excellency Bayan Abdul Rahman is the Kurdistan Regional Government Representative of the United States, working on a wide array of political, security, humanitarian, economic, and cultural matters, and promoting coordination and partnership. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Abdul Rahman. We appreciate it.
Good morning from Washington, and thank you, Nadine. And I would also like to thank Yazda and the Zovogyan Partnership for inviting me to participate in this anniversary conference. I know from experience that the pain of loss and trauma is with us every day of the year, but anniversaries do bring that pain into sharp focus, and I want to express my heartfelt condolences to our Yazidi brothers and sisters. My family is from Sinjar, and while we're not Yazidi, I feel a special kinship to our Yazidi brothers and sisters. The subject of our panel, and I'm honored to be part of this very distinguished panel, the subject of our panel is to make practical recommendations for the inclusion of women in reconstruction and peace building. So why should women be included in post-conflict reconstruction and peace building? Well, the most obvious answer is because women are half of the population. And it's strange that sometimes we have to remind our menfolk that that is the reality. But also, women often, whether they are working or carers at home, are the caretakers of the family. They are often responsible for education, for health, and taking care of their family. Women have a different experience of conflict, and their experience is often excluded when it comes to peace building and reconstruction. But women, quite often before the conflict has begun, have already been disadvantaged. Already women often have unequal access to education, to economic opportunities, to jobs, and to status. And as Nadine, you said earlier, it's been proven over and over again that women's direct participation in peace negotiations increases substantially the quality of the peace and the sustainability of the peace. One final point. Men have been trying for decades and centuries to establish peace. It's about time that women were allowed to have a seat at the table and to be part of that peace building. What I've said applies to women around the world, but it applies even more clearly to our Yazidi sisters. And so these are the reasons, some of the reasons, I'm sure there are many thousands of other reasons, why Yazidi women should be at the negotiating table. So the Yazidis, as we know, have been the victims of sexual conflict. Their experience of violence at the hands of ISIS has been different from that of their menfolk. Everybody is traumatized, whether you're the husband, the brother, or the father of a woman or a girl who's been sexually abused. You are also traumatized. The Yazidis clearly have repeatedly said that they want some kind of protection for their community to be able to survive. They want to rebuild Sinjar, their homes, their villages, their city. They want support for justice to be addressed. Even those who are in the camps and are relatively safe, they need education, healthcare, and other opportunities. The KRG is doing its best to provide this, but it's not able to do it alone. The Yazidis themselves have repeatedly said they want their voices to be included, and they are right to demand that. And it is incumbent on all of us, the Kurdistan Regional Government, the Iraqi federal government, the international community, the United Nations, to listen to that and to respond, not just with speeches, but also with practical steps. So there are many challenges to including women in the post-conflict negotiations, reconstruction effort, seeking of justice. As I mentioned earlier, women often already are starting at a disadvantaged position. But also when it comes to peace negotiations, when it comes to discussing reconstruction, justice and accountability, women are often perceived as unskilled, as lacking the know-how, or even lacking the status, so that their input in those discussions is not valued as much. This, frankly, requires a change of mindset in the leaderships of international and regional and national organizations. It needs a change of mindset by all of us. Women are the victims of conflict. They need to be at the table and they need to have a practical input in what their future will hold. They may need support in achieving that status, gaining those skills, though I would argue many of them already have skills to negotiate because they do that every day in their lives. Some of that training and assistance can be provided by the international community. But there are some deep-seated issues that we all face in Iraq, all women in Iraq face, but of course, particularly if you are a Yazidi or a Christian or from another religion that is not Islam. According to Iraqi law, the religion can only be passed on through the father. Why is that? A child has a mother and a father. This needs to change. I believe the Constitution states that religion can be passed through the mother and the father, but in practice, this is not the reality. Nationality is the same. Nationality is passed on through the father. These kinds of laws need to be changed in Iraq. There is another law that every now and then, a draft law, every now and then raises its ugly head and then is pushed back, but it should alarm every woman in Iraq. It's referred to sometimes as the Jafari law. This would allow girls as young as, I believe, 9 to be married. The fact that this draft law comes up every now and then in the Iraqi parliament illustrates to all of us the status of women. And this is why we all need to fight together against this kind of push against women's rights and girls' rights. Other challenges, the lack of role models, frankly, not only in our own society in Iraq, but internationally. How many international peace negotiations have included women? I believe there must be very, very few. We need more role models, regionally and internationally. And then we need to understand that women's perspective is rarely included in the post-conflict dialogue that takes place. So what can I recommend? These are my humble opinions and my humble recommendations to my Yazidi sisters and brothers. But they also, of course, are recommendations to the KRG, my own government, and I represent that government, to the Iraqi government, to the United Nations, to our partners, the United States, the UK, France, Germany, all these other countries, and my recommendations to civil society and NGOs. My recommendation: the Yazidis already have incredibly powerful female advocates. Look at who champions you. It's Nadia Murad, it's Pari Ibrahim, it's the speakers that we've heard today and yesterday. It's the Yazidi Survivors Network. You have so many powerful women. Vian Dakhil, who was a member of parliament in 2014 and spoke out in the Iraqi parliament, calling on the then prime minister to hear about the genocide that was being perpetrated against her people. You already have so many powerful female advocates. They are powerful, advocating for you internationally. We need that power to be also existing in Iraq and in Kurdistan. So we need to find a mechanism where your voices are just as powerful domestically as they are internationally. While most of the political parties, governments in Iraq and Kurdistan have very few female representatives, I have to say in Kurdistan we're doing better than Baghdad, but still we can do better too. You need to build up your grassroots organizations. You have so many powerful organizations already, but keep building up those grassroots organizations. Reach out to women's representations and organizations in Iraq and in Kurdistan. Reach across that divide and find a wider support network for yourself. One recommendation for international mediators, whether it's the UN, our coalition partners, all of those donors who support the humanitarian situation in Iraq and Kurdistan, you can insist that Yazidi women be included. You should insist that their voices should be heard. You should insist on quotas. Force us to do this. And you should fund the participation of the Yazidi women if for some reason or another they are not able to afford to leave their jobs or their families to participate in these discussions. And you should support the women experts who are already working in conflict resolution. I think all of us need to raise awareness of the importance of involving Yazidi women and women in general in post-conflict peace dialogue and negotiations. Male mediators, of course, need to be at the table, but so do the women, and that needs to be understood. It's hard to put grassroots organizations, throw them into a mediating situation when many of the political leaders have been experienced at doing this for decades. So it would be unfair to expect a grassroots civil society organization to walk in and have the same clout and be heard in the same way. That is the reality. So the best thing is to build up your network, practice your lobbying, which you already do so powerfully and so well, and be ready, prepare yourselves to be at the table. Prepare, what are your demands? What are your red lines? What do you go into the negotiating room with that you are not prepared to give up? What can you negotiate on? Prepare yourself for that day. Again, these are my humble opinions, my humble recommendations, and I hope you accept them in the good spirit that they are meant. Thank you once again for allowing me to participate in this important discussion.
Thank you for your wise words and recommendations. I very much appreciate it. Our last panelist who'll be presenting is Her Excellency Raisin Dalir Mustafa. She's a human rights activist and a member of the Iraq Parliament. She sits on the Parliament Women, Children and Family Committee and is a member of the Iraq Women Parliament Network. She's also a member of the Kurdistan Association for Lawyers. We're pleased to have you, Your Excellency. Thank you.
مساء الخير جميعاً. بصورة عامة تمر علينا الذكرى السادسة لإبادة الكرد الإيزيديين وهي جريمة ضد الإنسانية جمعاء وستبقى في ذاكرة كل منصف لسنين طوال. أنا أحكي اليوم على برلمان العراقي خلال 4 سنوات الماضية من 2014 حتى 2018. بهذا الوقت إحنا سوينا فقط قرار كجريمة داعش ضد اليزيديين. هذه الجريمة جريمة جينوسايد. إحنا نعرف داخل البرلمان العراقي حتى إذا كان إحنا نعترف بهذه الجريمة كجريمة جينوسايد ما بها أي استفادة لهذه المجتمعنا كمجتمع العراقي، لأنه جريمة الإبادة البشرية يحتاج إلى من قبل محكمة دولية، والعراق إحنا نعرف لحد الآن ما انضم إلى محكمة دولية. لهذا هذه الجينوسايد، هذه القرار صدر من برلمان العراقي مجرد قرار باقي بدون أي استفادة. مع الأسف الشديد يعني هذا الشيء لحد الآن. اليوم ذكرى إحنا سمعنا بيان مال رئيس الجمهورية، مال رئيس الوزراء، مال رئيس البرلمان. مع الأسف الشديد بعد 6 سنوات ما بها أي شيء، أي قرار على تنفيذهم على أرض الواقع. أي شيء سوى خلال 6 سنوات لهذه الجريمة ضد الإنسانية وخاصة ضد الإيزيديين. نحن نعلم هذه الجريمة يحتاج إلى دولة قوية، وهذه الدولة كاسم دولة عراق من قبل رئيس الوزراء جمع كل هاي الأدلة كموجودة داخل دولتنا. مع الأسف من 2014 تا 2018 من هذا الوقت فقط شكلت محكمة في دهوك، هذه المحكمة لجمع الأدلة لجينوسايد لجرائم الدواعش. إحنا عرفنا، وهذه المحكمة محكمة صغيرة فقط مجرد قاضي ومحقق عدلي وادعاء العام. هذه المحكمة صغيرة محتاج إلى داخل العراق إحنا نشكل هذه المحكمة، محكمة خاصة لجمع هذه الأدلة. للأسف ماكو قرار وماكو أي محكمة مختصة. وشيء آخر كمهم إحنا لازم نحكي هاي تنفيذ قرار مجلس الأمن من 2017 كقرار هذه المجلس الأممي شكل هذه القرار ومجموعة من الأمم المتحدة داخل العراق ولجنة خاصة مجموعة من الأشخاص على أساس لازم هذه الأشخاص عندهم خبرة تامة من القضاة، كعندهم خبرة من جرائم الجينوسايد. مع الأسف هذه الشخص كان موجودة بهذه اللجنة طبيبة أسنان. مع الأسف يعني ليش هاني أقول هذه الحقائق؟ إحنا إذا كان فعلا نريد نشتغل لازم أشخاص مختصين تشتغلون بهذه الأمور. وشيء آخر لازم إحنا نعرف لحد الآن مشروع قانون الناجيات وصل إلى مجلس النواب من 2018 لحد الآن فقط قرأت قراءة أولى. وهذه المشروع إحنا عندنا مشكلة كبيرة بيها، أكو فقرة إحنا مشاكلنا هواي خاصة مختص بالنساء الإيزيديات، كعندهم أطفال أنجبوا عن طريق الاغتصاب، وهذه الأطفال يحتاجون إلى عندهم هوية، أحوال مدنية، بطاقة وطنية. لحد الآن هذه الأطفال يمكن هسه عندهم مدرسة بدون أي هوية. هذه مشاكل كبيرة. داخل هذه المشروع القانون كتب يرجع إلى قوانين النافذة داخل العراق. قوانين النافذة داخل العراق إذا كان أي طفل يولد بالعراق بدون أب مباشرة مسلم، وهذا مشاكل كبيرة. إحنا نعرف شقد هاي المشاكل موجودة، لأنه هذا الطفل يمكن إذا كان بأي ديانة تحب هذه الابن أو ابنة إلها وباسمها، هذا مشكلة لحد الآن. إحنا داخل العراق الأطفال بأسماء أبوهم، وإذا كان ما عندهم أب حقيقي عن طريق عقد الزواج، هذه الأب لازم أب وهمي، وهذا مشكلة. إحنا نعرف شقد عندنا أطفال بدون هوية. يعني أنا ما أقول أطفال الدواعش، لأنه هذه الأم اغتصب بدون إرادتها، وهذه الطفل بالآخر أنا هذه طفلي وأني أريد أربي هذا الطفل، مو أني أحكي هذا الطفل منو أبوها. بس أعرف يحتاج بأي دولة إذا كان صارت هاي المشاكل وبلاء بالدولة يحتاج إلى قوانين جديدة. أما داخل الدولة العراقية وخاصة برلمان العراق لحد الآن ماكو مشروع وماكو نية لأعضاء البرلمان حتى يعدلون هذه الفقرة. مع الأسف يعني إحنا إذا كان نحكي بصورة قانونية عن بلد العراق. وشيء آخر كلش مهم، إحنا نحكي على ضحايا رجعوا من إيد داعش. لازم نعرف أغلب الضحايا، عوائل الضحايا اشتروا هذه الضحايا بدون دعم حكومي. الحكومة العراقية إهمال تام عن طريقه، ما عنده أي دعم لهذه العوائل حتى يرجعون نسائهم بناتهم بين إيد الداعش. هم لأنفسهم اشتروا هذه البنات وهذه الضحايا رجعوا إلى العراق. مع الأسف حكومة إهمال كبير لدى الحكومة العراقية وما عنده أي اهتمام لهذه القضايا. إحنا نعرف يعني إذا كان فعلا هذه الدولة عندها برنامج، لازم عندها برنامج تام لهذه الضحايا. شو سوى لهذه الضحايا لحد الآن؟ من 2015 أكو عندنا قانون حماية اجتماعية. بهذا الوقت إحنا كلجنة المرأة ويا لجنة المرأة بإقليم كردستان طلبنا من وزارة الرعاية الاجتماعية، وزارة الرعاية بهذا الوقت أكو قانون من قبل الرعاية الاجتماعية. إحنا طلبنا حتى من وزير حتى مشمولين هذه الضحايا بهذه القانون الحماية الاجتماعية. طلبنا وسوينا. مع الأسف لحد الآن أقل من ضحايا النساء والفتيات استفادوا من هذا القانون، لأنه مشاكل بين حكومة إقليم كردستان وحكومة الفيدرالية يعني باقية. ما قدروا حكومة إقليم كردستان يوصل هاي الأسماء كرجعوا من داعش إلى إقليم كردستان. محتاجة إلى رعاية. هذه رعاية موجودة داخل القانون، لازم تأخذ هذه البنت أو الضحية حتى يعيش بهذه المناطق. كلنا نعرف وين يعيشون بالمخيمات، شقد وضعهم صعب. بس هذه الخلافات لحد الآن هاي 6 سنوات موجودة وباقية، ما بها أي خطوات حقيقية، خطوات هم حكومة إقليم كردستان وهم حكومة فيدرالية. إحنا نريد جمع الأدلة. بأي طريقة إحنا نجمع الأدلة؟ غير عندنا محكمة مختصة لجمع الأدلة، قاضي مختص لجمع الأدلة. هذه المحكمة يحتاج إلى دولة حتى يشكل هذا. صدام حسين بجرائم صدام حسين بعدها من 2003 من 2005 شكلنا محكمة مختصة لجرائم لمحاكمة مجرمين لنظام صدام حسين. هسه بهذا الوقت إحنا محتاجين فعلا إلى هذه المحكمة مختصة لجمع هذه الأدلة. وحكومة ودولة العراقية لحد الآن ما منضمة إلى محكمة دولية. إذا كان ما منضمة إلى محكمة دولية، إحنا شلون نقدر هذه الأدلة القانونية نوصل إلى محكمة دولية؟ تقريبا قبل 2 برئيس الوزراء السابق بإقليم كردستان ورئيس البرلمان السابق بإقليم كردستان مجموعة أدلة بين إيديهم وصلوا إلى المحكمة، كلنا إلى محكمة دولية. إحنا نعرف يعني الدولة الوحيد يقدر يوصل هذه جمع الأدلة إلى محكمة دولية حتى قانونيا بصورة قانونية يوصل هذه المحكمة، حتى هذه المحكمة بها إجراءات قانونية ويعترف كهذه جريمة جينوسايد، جريمة إبادة بشرية، جريمة إبادة إنسانية. إحنا محتاجين لهذه الأوقات مرة 6 سنوات. مع الأسف إذا كان هسه الضحية قبل 6 سنوات رجع بإيد داعش بهذا الوقت عنده كل الأدلة بين إيديها، وحتى يقدر يوصل إلى هذه المحكمة بأدلة حقيقية، وحتى كلامه بهذا الوقت كلام. بس بعد 6 سنوات إذا إحنا نوصل إلى هذه المحكمة يمكن ما يوصل هذه الأمور البشعة كصارت بها يوصل إلى هذه المحاكم. هذه المشاكل لحد الآن موجودة، وبرلمان العراقي مع الأسف وهم برلمان الكردستاني مع الأسف ما عنده أي قرار لتشكيل أي لجنة مختصة لجمع الأدلة مرة أخرى أقول. وشيء آخر هم أنا أحكي لحد الآن هذه الضحايا عندهم مشاكل هواية داخل المخيمات. إحنا كم مرة زرنا مخيمات لأنه بعضهم من هذه ضحايا كان رجعوا. إحنا نعرف داخل مناطقهم كشنغال ككوجو أغلب المستمسكات القانونية حرق بهذه المناطق، وبعضهم لحد الآن بدون أي مستمسكات. هذه المستمسكات كضرورية، عندهم بهذا الوقت تزوجوا، عندهم عقد الزواج وهيك، لحد الآن عندهم أطفال بدون أي مستمسك قانوني. وهذه المشاكل كم مرة وصل إلى حكومة كهذا عمل حكومة الفيدرالية بطريقة سهلة يعمل على هذه الأمور، يوصلها إلى أماكنهم بطريقة قانونية أسهل. أما مع الأسف كل هاي المشاكل باقية، مجرد بكل سنة بالذكرى عندهم مجموعة خطابات أساسية كمثل اليوم أنا سمعنا كلهم عندهم بيانات، عندهم استنكار لهذا اليوم، أما بدون أي عمل حقيقي. أما شيء مهم إحنا لازم نهتم بها، والشيء لازم إحنا نفتخر بها كمرأة اليزيدية، قدر وصل هذه الأصوات إلى العالم، إلى دول العالم، هذه الأصوات الحقيقية كجريمة الاغتصاب وجريمة الاتجار بالبشر، مو جريمة اعتيادية. أما مرأة اليزيدية قدر بأصواتهم بقوتهم وصل هذه الجرائم إلى بر البلد إلى العالم. حتى إحنا نفتخر بنادية مراد، بحنيفة، بكل هاي النساء كقدروا يوصلون هذه الأصوات إلى بر العراق حتى يسمعون من طريقة سمع هذه الأصوات عن طريق النساء الإيزيديات. ولحد الآن هم أقوياء فعلا، وأنا أطلب من كل النشطاء الإيزيديات لأنه هم فعلا الضحايا ويعرفون شقد هذه الألم موجودة بداخلهم، هم يقدرون مرة أخرى يوصلون هذه الأصوات إلى العالم. لأنه هذه الدول مع الأسف لأنه انضمام إلى محكمة دولية يمكن للدولة العراقية كلش صعب. أما إحنا مجموعة من الطرائق الأخرى موجودة، حتى عن طريق النشطاء المدنيين، حتى عن طريق سفرائنا بطريقة أخرى نطلب من دول الآخر من هذا. إحنا نعرف داخل داعش مجموعة من الدول كأعضائهم موجودة داخل هذه الفرقة الإرهابية كاسم داعش. إحنا نطلب من هذه الدول الأخرى عن طريق البرلمانيات، برلمان هذه الدول، حتى يعترفون بهذه الجريمة كجريمة جينوسايد. وبهذا الوقت إحنا نقدر عن طريق هذه النشطاء، عن طريق هذه الأدلة قليلة كموجودة داخل دولتنا، لأنه إذا كان ماكو محكمة مختصة، ماكو مكان مختص لجمع الأدلة، شلون إحنا نوصل؟ ليش أنا هلقت أحكي على موضوع الأدلة وموضوع التثبيت؟ لأنه بالآخر إذا كان أنا أريد هذه جريمة جينوسايد، جريمة إبادة بشرية بأي طريقة، غير عندنا كل الأدلة قانونية حتى نوصل إلى هذه المحكمة. كل هاي الأدلة قانونية بإيدنا حتى بصوت عالي إحنا نروح يم هذه المحكمة. وهذه الطريقة الأولى عن طريق الدولة العراقية. من هسه أنا أقول الدولة العراقية أكيد عنده دور، أما ما عنده حق عن طريق الدولة العراقية يوصل هذه الأدلة إلى محكمة جنائية. لازم بأي طريقة إحنا نعمل على دول الأخرى حتى هم يساعدنا نوصل هذه الأدلة إلى محكمة ويعترف المحكمة بهذه الجريمة. لأنه إحنا سوابق داخل العراق، جريمة أنفال، جريمة حلبشة، لحد الآن هذه الجرائم مجرد يعترف الحكومة العراقية أو البرلمان العراقي هذه جرائم جينوسايد بدون أي شيء قانوني داخل الدولة وبرا الدولة. لأنه كلنا نعرف يعني إذا كانت الدولة العراقية فعلا ريد لهذه الضحايا تشتغل وتعمل بصورة جدية، لأنه إحنا نعرف هذه الجريمة مجرد مو بس اعتراف، هم محتاجين إلى هذه الضحايا، محتاجين إلى قوانين أخرى، محتاجين إلى إعانة أخرى، محتاجين إلى رجوعهم إلى أماكنهم. لحد الآن أغلب الإزيديين موجودين بالمخيمات، مع العلم بعد تحرير هاي المناطق لازم يرجعون إلى أماكنهم ودورهم مرة أخرى وإرجاعهم إلى حياة اعتيادية. أغلب النساء بعد رجع بيد الداعش لحد الآن حالة نفسية ما بها أي علاج نفسي لهذه الامرأة كموجودة بالمخيمات. أعرف بعض المنظمات اشتغلت، بعض النشطاء اشتغلت، بس بصورة عامة محتاجين إلى تأهيل مرة أخرى داخل دولتنا. ما عنده أي برنامج حقيقي، أي برنامج من قبل خاصة إهمال كبير من قبل الدولة العراقية. اليوم إحنا شفنا رئيس الوزراء العراقي اجتمع ويا مجموعة من الضحايا، ضحايا الإزيديين، بس أتمنى هذه الخطوة مو مجرد بس اجتماع وبعد بها انتهاء. إحنا محتاجين إلى كل هاي الأمور بصورة قانونية، وهذه الضحايا فعلا محتاجين إلى يعني حتى مرة أخرى ما يتكرر داخل دولتنا. إحنا نقول المكون الإزيدي فعلا هذه المكون بها احترام لهذه الدولة، بها مكانة لهذه الدولة. عراق تعترف بأنه هذه المكونات شيء عظيم داخل دولتها، بس يحتاج إلى حماية مو مجرد بالكلام. مرة أخرى أنا أقول أتمنى السنة الجاية إحنا نعترف من قبل دولتنا بجريمة جينوسايد عالميا لإبادة الإزيديين وكل المكونات الأخرى داخل العراق. وشيء آخر، أتمنى نساء الإزيديات السنة الجاية عندهم دور قوي داخل الشنغال ومناطقهم، لأنه فعلا هم أقوياء وفعلا هم دورهم دور قوي. وهذه هسه أي معرفة داخل الدول العالم بالجريمة إبادة بشرية ضد الإنسانية من قبل نساء الإزيديات. وشكرا.
شكرا لك طال عمرك. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of our panelists who have spoken from the bottom of their hearts today, not just on women's empowerment, but recognizing that women's empowerment is community empowerment, and without it, there can be no sustainability and no lasting peace. In the interest of time, I would like to acknowledge that this is yet another panel today that needed a lot more time than we were able to give to it. I would like to thank Ms. Katrian, Zina, MP Rezan, Her Excellency Bayan, and Dashni. Thank you very much for being with us today. I assure you that what absolutely needs to happen is that we give this conversation, this important debate, the dedicated time that it deserves. And that will absolutely happen under the leadership of Yazda, with the Yazidi Survivor Network. So thank you very much for being with us.